They say some nights carve you anew, even when the dawn breaks like any other. What began as a casual gathering with friends spiraled into a vortex, a test of boundaries that left me adrift, questioning the bedrock of my marriage and the very contours of myself. Mark, my husband of almost 30 years, and I were veterans of these intimate soirees, cozy get togethers with friends who felt like extensions of our own family. These were our rituals, a comforting rhythm in the chaos of city life, a way to reconnect with familiar faces and laugh away the week's relentless pressure. The night unfolded innocently enough, laughter echoing through Lisa and Paul's brownstone in the West Village. Glasses chimed in toasts, music pulsed softly, and conversation filled the air like warm smoke. A fireplace crackled merrily, casting flickering shadows across the room as we settled into our usual easy banter. But as the hours ticked by, a subtle shift occurred. Laughter grew louder, edges sharpened in the teasing, and an undercurrent of tension, unnamed and unsettling, began to vibrate beneath the surface. Mark seemed unusually animated, huddled in corners with his friends, his voice a low murmur, his eyes darting around the room. Watching him, a strange unease coiled in my stomach. His eyes met mine briefly, and for the first time in years, I couldn't decipher the emotion behind them. I didn't realize it then, but I was standing on the precipice of a night that would peel back layers I never anticipated, revealing hidden facets of Mark, of our friends, and of desires that had lain dormant longer than I dared to admit. The evening flowed with the familiar ease of years of friendship. Mark and I greeted Tom and Susan, married just as long as us, Lisa and Paul, our hosts, and David, Mark's oldest friend, a man known for his quick wit and easy charm. Everyone seemed unusually buoyant, their laughter echoing a little too loudly, their stories embellished with extra flourish. Lisa's apartment was, as always, impeccably decorated, strings of fairy lights twinkling along the mantelpiece, a lavish spread of appetizers and drinks arranged on the antique table. The rich aroma of spiced nuts and mulled wine filled the air. The playlist was upbeat, a mix of classic rock and jazz, a nostalgic soundtrack to our younger days. Yet, even amidst this cozy familiarity, something felt off-kilter. Conversations lingered a fraction too long, certain glances exchanged between couples seemed almost conspiratorial. As the wine flowed freely and the hour grew late, the teasing took on a sharper edge, a flirtatious boldness that was unusual for our circle. I chalked it up to the wine, to the release valve of a long week, and tried to brush it aside. We'd all weathered our share of storms lately. Maybe this was just collective steam being let off. Then, watching Mark from across the room, I noticed him deep in conversation with Tom and Paul, their heads close together, voices hushed. Mark had always been close with them, the three of them often reverting to their college days when they got together, but tonight their expressions were different. Serious, yet laced with a strange anticipation. When Mark's gaze flickered to mine, he offered a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. A pang of uncertainty shot through me, but before I could dwell on it, David joined me, offering a glass of wine. David, Mark's best friend, someone I'd grown to trust implicitly over the years, his presence was always a comfort. "Having fun?" he asked, his tone light, but his eyes studying me with an intensity that made me slightly uncomfortable. I nodded, taking a sip of wine. "Of course, it's always good to see everyone." He raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his expression. "Is it, though? Tonight feels different, doesn't it?" I hesitated, searching his face for clues. "Yes, it does. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something's off." He nodded, his gaze shifting briefly towards Mark and the others. "Sometimes people like to shake things up, try something new." The way he said it, a subtle emphasis on new, made my pulse quicken, though I couldn't explain why. Before I could respond, he offered a reassuring smile and drifted back towards the group, leaving me with more questions than answers. I tried to rejoin the party, mingling with friends, forcing laughter at jokes, listening to familiar stories, but I couldn't shake the persistent feeling that something was brewing just beneath the surface. Snippets of conversations drifted to me, phrases that hinted at secrets, hidden intentions, words that hung in the air, leaving me feeling both curious and distinctly uneasy. Mark returned to my side, his face flushed with wine, his eyes bright with an intensity I hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked, his tone casual, but there was a flicker behind his gaze, a mixture of excitement and anticipation that sent a shiver down my spine. "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "But is everything all right?" He chuckled, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Why wouldn't it be? We're just having a bit of fun, aren't we?" His answer was vague, and it only deepened my unease. I felt like I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, a piece everyone else seemed to possess. I scanned the room, noting how the other couples were clustered together, their laughter a bit too loud, their expressions a bit too eager. It was as though they were all privy to some unspoken plan, something I hadn't been prepared for. As the night wore on, my unease intensified, fueled by the strange energy in the room, the charged laughter, the lingering glances, the hushed whispers. It all felt surreal, like we were all actors in a play that had taken an unexpected, unsettling turn. I wanted to ask Mark what was going on, to demand an explanation, but each time I opened my mouth, the words seemed to freeze in my throat. Instead, I clung to my wine glass, hoping that whatever was happening would soon coalesce, would somehow make sense. But the answers I was seeking would arrive sooner than I anticipated, and in a way that would irrevocably alter everything. It was nearing midnight when the atmosphere palpably shifted. Tom and Susan, usually the first to call it a night, seemed to be lingering, their faces flushed, their laughter bordering on manic. Tom, normally reserved and quiet, was practically radiating excitement as he huddled with Mark and Paul, their voices low, but their expressions animated. Then, Mark approached me, his expression a complex mixture of excitement and something I couldn't quite name. He took my hand, gently pulling me towards the corner of the room where Tom and Susan stood, their faces mirroring the same heightened anticipation. "Sarah," Mark said softly, his voice both soothing and strangely intense. "We've been talking and, well, we thought we'd try something different tonight." The phrase hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications, and I felt my heart begin to race. "Different?" I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded, his gaze locked on mine. "Yes, something new. Tom and Susan are open to it, and, well, so am I." I glanced around, my mind reeling, trying to grasp the enormity of what he was suggesting. In that instant, a hush had fallen over the room, as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for a decision, a choice that would either maintain the fragile normalcy of the evening or catapult it into uncharted territory. Mark's hand tightened around mine, and I felt his pulse quicken, mirroring the frantic rhythm of my own. There was no mistaking the suggestion in his gaze, the quiet thrill that sparked in his eyes as he looked at me. My heart pounded against my ribs as I struggled to process Mark's proposition. The idea of partner swapping, of swinging, wasn't something we'd ever even flirted with, let alone seriously discussed. My cheeks flushed hot as I realized this wasn't some impulsive whim. This had been planned, or at least extensively discussed, among the men. I glanced around, catching subtle nods, fleeting glances exchanged between the other couples, confirming that everyone was in on it, everyone but me. Mark's gaze was steady, though a flicker of hesitation danced in his eyes, as if he were testing my reaction, gauging my willingness before fully committing. I felt dizzy, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. The idea seemed both utterly absurd and somehow magnetically tempting, a forbidden fruit stirring emotions I hadn't realized I was capable of feeling. "Sarah," Mark whispered, leaning closer, his voice low and reassuring. "This is entirely up to you. If it doesn't feel right, we walk away. But if there's a part of you that's curious, I want you to know that you have my full support, whatever you choose." The sincerity in his voice disarmed me. I could see he wasn't trying to pressure me. If anything, he was offering me a startling degree of freedom. Yet, beneath the sincerity, there was something else in his expression, a raw anticipation, an eagerness that made my heart race even faster. I glanced at Tom and Susan, standing nearby, watching us with a mixture of empathy and something akin to encouragement. Susan offered a small, almost conspiratorial smile, as if she too had once stood at this precipice of apprehension and uncertainty. Her smile felt like an invitation, an assurance that she understood the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. A hush had fallen over the room, and I realized the other couples were watching us, waiting to see which path we would choose. It was as though the entire night hinged on this moment, on whether or not we would dare to cross the invisible line that separated comfortable friendship from something far more intimate, far more dangerous. For a long, suspended moment, I stared at Mark, searching his face for any trace of doubt, of regret. But all I saw was anticipation, a thrilling kind of openness. He was offering me a chance to explore something new, something we had never dared to consider before, and despite the fear and the swirling uncertainty, I couldn't deny the flicker of forbidden curiosity that had been ignited by his audacious proposal. "Only, if you're sure," I whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. He nodded, his expression softening. "I am, but it's your decision, Sarah. I'll respect whatever you choose." I took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. The room seemed to shrink, the faces of our friends blurring at the edges of my vision as I focused solely on Mark, on the quiet promise in his eyes. A surge of adrenaline, a thrill I hadn't felt in years, shot through me, and before I could second guess myself, I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. The reaction was immediate. A low murmur of approval rippled through the room, and Tom and Susan stepped forward, their expressions warm, welcoming. Mark gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, and a strange sense of liberation washed over me, a feeling of letting go, of embracing the unknown. But as I glanced around the room, a chilling realization began to dawn. This decision had consequences I hadn't yet begun to comprehend. Tom and Susan, with an ease that surprised me, became the first to take the plunge. They exchanged a quick, knowing glance, a silent conversation passing between them before they approached another couple. The transition was seamless, almost practiced, as though this was a natural progression, something they had been waiting to explore. Watching them, a strange mix of emotions churned within me: curiosity, a hesitant admiration, and a flicker of apprehension that tightened like a knot in my stomach. I glanced at Mark, searching for reassurance, and he offered a gentle smile, his eyes filled with a quiet confidence. I could see he trusted my judgment, that he was giving me the space, the freedom, to decide how far I wanted to take this. His openness, his willingness to venture into the unknown with me was both comforting and exhilarating. The room seemed to crackle with a new energy as other couples began to follow suit, pairs shifting and reforming like dancers in a strange, intimate ballet. There was a palpable sense of liberation in the air, a feeling of breaking free from the invisible constraints of routine and expectation. A thrill of anticipation, a sense of stepping into uncharted territory, pulsed through me, even as a part of me remained hesitant, uncertain of what this night would ultimately mean for us. Mark leaned in close, his voice barely audible above the rising murmur of conversation. "If you want to stop, just say the word. We'll leave." But even as he spoke, I could see the excitement in his eyes, a glimmer of something I hadn't witnessed in years. It was as if the evening had rekindled a part of him that had been dormant, a part I hadn't realized I missed. A surge of affection for him, a renewed sense of connection that transcended the familiar boundaries of our marriage, washed over me. And in that moment, I knew I wanted to continue, to see where this night would lead, to unravel the mysteries it held. Just as I was about to respond, David, Mark's oldest friend, approached us. His gaze was steady, his expression warm and inviting. He had always been a calming presence, a quiet anchor at every gathering, and tonight was no different. He extended a hand, offering me a choice, a path forward that felt both thrilling and forbidden. "Would you like to join me, Sarah?" he asked, his voice gentle. I hesitated, glancing at Mark for reassurance. He gave a small nod, his hand brushing mine in a silent gesture of support. A surge of confidence, a sense of freedom that was both exhilarating and terrifying coursed through me. Taking a deep breath, I reached for David's hand, allowing myself to be guided into this uncharted experience, to embrace the unknown. Mark's gaze remained on me, a silent promise of his support, his acceptance, and I felt a strange sense of unity, a connection that transcended words. As David led me to a quieter corner of the room, away from the swirling energy of the main gathering, I felt my nerves begin to settle, replaced by a calm sense of anticipation. I glanced back at Mark, who was now engaged in conversation with another woman, his demeanor relaxed, open. Seeing him at ease, I felt my own lingering fears begin to dissipate, replaced by a quiet confidence that this night, however surreal, would somehow bring us closer. David and I found a small alcove near a window, where the soft glow of candles cast a warm, intimate light. We sat together, our hands resting on the small table between us, and for a moment we simply looked at each other, sharing a silent understanding that transcended the need for words. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft, his gaze filled with genuine empathy. I nodded, though my heart was still racing. "I think so. This is new for me." He smiled, his expression reassuring. "It's new for all of us, Sarah, but we're here together, no pressure, no expectations, just an opportunity to explore." His words were calming, a gentle reminder that this night was about choice, about freedom. A sense of relief washed over me, a release from the weight of expectation, and for the first time I allowed myself to relax, to simply be present in the moment, to enjoy it for what it was. As we sat there, talking quietly, I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't anticipated, sharing thoughts and feelings I hadn't even fully admitted to myself. David listened patiently, his gaze never wavering, and I felt a connection between us that was both unexpected and surprisingly comforting. It was as though he understood the complex tapestry of my emotions, the intricate blend of excitement and apprehension that filled my mind. Then, without a word, he reached for my hand, his touch gentle, his expression filled with a warmth that radiated outwards. A spark, a thrill, shot through me, sending a shiver down my spine. For the first time, I allowed myself to embrace the sensation, to let go of the inhibitions and fears that had been holding me back for so long. In that quiet moment, I realized this night was about more than just curiosity or fleeting desire. It was about rediscovering a part of myself that had been lost, a part that yearned for connection, for understanding, for a different kind of intimacy. And as I looked into David's eyes, I felt a sense of liberation, a freedom I hadn't known was possible. As the evening deepened, David and I settled further into conversation, the ambient noise of the party fading into a distant hum as we lingered in our quiet alcove. He shared stories from his life I'd never heard before, tales of past travels, long-held regrets, dreams he'd set aside to navigate the responsibilities of adulthood. In his words, I heard echoes of my own life, reflections of choices made, paths not taken, leaving me wondering about the roads not traveled. I hadn't realized how starved I was for this kind of connection, a space to explore the buried parts of myself, the long-forgotten yearnings. Our hands rested on the table between us, our fingers occasionally brushing, an innocent touch that sent a surprising warmth through me. The candlelight softened the room, casting David's features in a gentle glow, and for a fleeting moment, it felt as though we were the only two people in the world. He lowered his gaze, his voice softening even further. "You know," he murmured, "I've watched you and Mark over the years. You two have always seemed so solid, like nothing could shake you." I smiled, a mix of pride and a quiet sadness tugging at the corners of my mouth. We've had our ups and downs just like everyone else. Sometimes I wonder if we've just learned to exist within our routines, if we're too comfortable, if that makes sense. He nodded, his gaze meeting mine, understanding flickering in his eyes. "It does. I think many of us are guilty of that. Life pulls us in so many directions that we forget to nurture the connections that truly matter." A comfortable silence settled between us, and I felt a strange sense of peace in his words, a feeling that resonated far beyond mere physical attraction. With David, I didn't feel pressured or judged. There was no expectation, no urgency. It was as if he intuitively understood the tangled complexities of my thoughts and emotions, giving me the freedom to explore them without fear. He reached for my hand again, his fingers grazing mine, and in that brief electric moment I felt an undeniable spark, a current surging between us, unexpected and powerful. I looked up, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs as our eyes met, and in that instant I saw the same longing mirrored back at me, a shared desire for connection, for intimacy, that transcended the comfortable boundaries of friendship. But before I could react, before I could fully process the maelstrom of emotion swirling within me, he leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper, raw with a vulnerability that resonated deep within me. "Sarah," he murmured, I don't want to complicate things, but there's something here, isn't there?" I hesitated, my mind racing, searching for the right words, the words that wouldn't shatter the fragile peace that had settled between us. "Yes," I finally replied, my voice barely audible. "I think there is." He reached out, gently brushing a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his touch feather-light, tender. "We don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with," he said softly, his gaze unwavering. "This is your choice, Sarah." His words were comforting, a gentle reminder that this night was about agency, about embracing the unknown, but only if I chose to. A surge of courage, a willingness to finally let go of the carefully constructed walls of fear and doubt that had surrounded me for so long, washed over me. With David, I felt safe, understood, as though I could finally, truly let down my guard. Without another word, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a soft, tentative kiss. It was gentle, unhurried, filled with a tenderness that took me completely by surprise. My heart leaped, a chaotic mixture of excitement and guilt swirling within me, but I couldn't bring myself to pull away. In that moment, I felt alive, truly alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. A spark reignited within me, a spark I hadn't even realized was missing. The kiss deepened, his hand cupping my face as he drew me closer, and I allowed myself to get lost in the moment, to surrender to the unfamiliar sensations, to let go of the reservations that had been holding me captive for so long. It was a release, a liberation from the stifling constraints of routine and expectation, a chance to reconnect with a long dormant part of myself. But as the kiss ended, reality came rushing back in a dizzying wave, and I pulled away, my mind reeling, a chaotic storm of conflicting emotions raging within me. I glanced around, suddenly acutely aware of the others in the room, our friends, the silent witnesses to this night of revelations. I caught a glimpse of Mark across the room, his expression unreadable, a mask of polite detachment, as he watched me, and a sharp pang of guilt stabbed through me. "I should go," I murmured, my voice shaky, barely above a whisper. David nodded, his gaze filled with understanding. "I understand. Just remember, Sarah," he said softly. "This night was about exploring something deeper. Don't be afraid of what you're feeling." I offered him a small, grateful smile, my heart heavy with a complex mixture of regret and a strange, undeniable longing. As I made my way back to Mark, I felt the weight of the evening settle upon me, a heavy cloak of realization that this night would irrevocably change things between us, whether we were ready for it or not. As I approached Mark, I saw the unspoken questions in his eyes, a silent inquiry I couldn't answer, not yet. He offered a gentle smile, reaching for my hand, his touch warm, familiar, a grounding presence amidst the swirling chaos within me. Despite everything, despite the whirlwind of emotions, a rush of love for him, a poignant reminder of the deep bond we had shared for so many years washed over me. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft, laced with a quiet concern. I nodded, my throat tight with unshed tears. "Yes, I think so." We walked towards the terrace, stepping out into the cool night air, the relative quiet allowing me a moment to gather my scattered thoughts, to process the torrent of emotions unleashed by the evening's seismic events. Mark stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, his solid presence grounding me, reminding me of the life we had built together, brick by brick, year by year. For a long time, we stood in silence, side by side, each lost in our own thoughts, the unspoken weight of the evening hanging heavily between us. I wanted to speak, to articulate the turmoil raging inside me, but the words seemed to catch in my throat, refusing to be voiced. Instead, I leaned against him, seeking the simple comfort of his physical warmth, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a reassurance I hadn't realized I desperately needed. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, filled with a newfound resolve. "Sarah," he began, "tonight was unexpected, but I think it's made me realize something." I looked up at him, searching his face for clues, trying to decipher the meaning behind his carefully chosen words. He continued, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I think we've been holding back, living within boundaries we set for ourselves years ago, boundaries that maybe don't fit us anymore. This evening, as strange as it was, made me see how much I still want to be close to you, how much I value what we have." His words resonated deep within me, striking a chord of truth I had been reluctant to acknowledge. We had become comfortable, perhaps too comfortable, settling into well-worn routines that kept us at a safe distance, hiding behind the illusion of familiarity rather than confronting the subtle shifts and changes that had inevitably occurred in our relationship over the long years. "I know," I replied softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I think I felt that too. I guess I just didn't know how to say it." He smiled, his expression gentle, understanding. "Then maybe," he said, "maybe this is our chance. A chance to reconnect, to rediscover each other in a way we haven't allowed ourselves to before." His words sparked a flicker of hope within me, a realization that this night, as complicated and unsettling as it had been, might actually be a beginning, not an end. A chance to deepen our connection, to rebuild the intimacy that had gradually faded, imperceptibly over time. In that quiet moment, standing under the vast expanse of the New York night sky, I felt a subtle but profound shift between us, a renewed sense of commitment, of shared understanding. We didn't need to dissect every detail of the evening, to analyze every glance and whispered word. The unspoken bond between us, forged over decades of shared experience, was enough. What mattered was that we were both willing to move forward, to embrace the uncertainties that lay ahead, and to find our way back to each other, not as we were, but as we were becoming. We spent the rest of the evening together on the terrace, talking softly about shared memories, long forgotten dreams, and the future that stretched before us, still unwritten, full of possibility. The raw intensity of the night gradually faded, replaced by a quiet, comfortable intimacy, a poignant reminder of the enduring love that had brought us together all those years ago. And as dawn approached, painting the city skyline in hues of soft gray and rose, I felt a fragile sense of peace settle over me, a tentative belief that this night, as surreal and unsettling as it had been, had somehow, inexplicably, brought us closer, opening a door to a new, uncharted chapter in our lives. The days that followed were a strange blend of routine and subtle, almost imperceptible change, leaving me feeling both grounded and strangely unsettled. Mark and I didn't explicitly discuss the specifics of the night, but its lingering presence permeated our interactions, an unspoken understanding that seemed to draw us closer in unexpected ways. There was a newfound openness between us, a willingness to share thoughts and emotions that had remained hidden, unvoiced, for years. We began to spend more time together, reclaiming stolen moments, taking long walks through Central Park in the evenings, reminiscing about the early, heady days of our relationship, tentatively rekindling the spark that had once defined us. But despite this newfound closeness, a part of me couldn't completely erase the memory of the intense connection I had felt with David, the quiet intimacy we had shared in that secluded corner of the party. It served as a constant, subtle reminder of the complexities of love, of the way our hearts could be pulled in unexpected directions, even when deeply committed to another. Mark, with a sensitivity I hadn't fully appreciated before, seemed to sense my internal struggle, offering me the space and quiet understanding I needed to process the swirling emotions, to come to terms with the choices we had made and the paths we had tentatively explored. He was remarkably patient, understanding, allowing me the freedom to navigate my complex feelings without judgment or pressure. It was a profound gift, a silent testament to the depth of his love, and I felt a renewed sense of gratitude for the man I had chosen to spend my life with, a man who was willing to weather the storm of uncertainty with me, side by side. Over time, the sharper edges of the memories of that night began to soften, replaced by a quiet sense of peace and contentment. The rigid boundaries we had once clung to had subtly shifted, imperceptibly expanding, allowing us to explore new depths of connection, new avenues of intimacy, to rebuild our relationship on a more resilient foundation of trust and mutual understanding. As we navigated our days, the silences between us became less of a barrier, less a void to be filled, and more of a shared space for quiet reflection. Mark and I both knew, without needing to articulate it, that what had transpired that night was not merely a fleeting, aberrant experience, but a moment of profound truth, an unexpected opportunity to confront the evolving reality of our relationship and the unspoken choices we had made along the way. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I both seemed to retreat slightly inward, each of us navigating the emotional aftermath in our own introspective way. Though we avoided direct discussion of the night's events, it lingered, unspoken, a palpable presence in the air between us, like an invisible thread connecting us through a shared, if slightly unsettling, experience. Silence, in its own strange, paradoxical way, had become a kind of bridge, a quiet space that allowed us each to reflect, to process, without the pressure to immediately explain or dissect every complex emotion. Our daily interactions took on a new, almost delicate quality, imbued with a subtle softness and a heightened consideration that hadn't been quite so pronounced before. We found ourselves lingering over morning coffee, sharing quiet, companionable moments in the evenings, as if tentatively rediscovering the fundamental rhythm of our relationship, relearning the subtle dance of intimacy after a subtle disruption. There was a sense of quiet relief in not having to rush towards easy explanations or premature conclusions. I felt as though we were carefully, patiently unwinding the complex knot of our intertwined feelings, slowly giving ourselves the necessary time and space to truly consider what this unexpected experience really meant for us, both individually and as a couple. One quiet night, as we lay in bed, the city sounds muted by the thick apartment walls, Mark reached for my hand, his touch gentle, familiar, entwining his fingers with mine in a gesture that was both simple and profoundly meaningful. The gesture, so commonplace, so deeply ingrained in our shared history, carried a weight, a resonance that spoke volumes, transcending the need for elaborate words. words. I could feel the steady pulse in his hand, a comforting reminder of the life we had built together, the quiet, enduring foundation of trust and deep companionship that had sustained us through so many seasons of life, through countless unspoken joys and shared sorrows. "Sarah," he whispered into the stillness of the room, his voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the city, "do you regret it?" I hesitated, letting the weight of his question settle around us, a silent, almost tangible presence in the darkened room. Did I regret it? A part of me, the part that still clung to tradition, to the comfortable predictability of our established life, to the reassuring certainty of knowing exactly where the boundaries of our marriage lay, instinctively recoiled at the memory, whispered a hesitant yes. But another part, a deeper, more honest part of me, the part that had felt the undeniable spark of connection with David, that had experienced the unexpected thrill of stepping into the unknown, of momentarily shedding the familiar skin of my everyday self, couldn't bring itself to fully, wholeheartedly regret the experience entirely. "No," I answered softly, my voice barely above a whisper, the single word hanging in the air between us. "No, I don't regret it. It was different. But maybe," I continued, groping for the right words to articulate the complex, still forming understanding within me. "Maybe we needed that difference. Maybe it's brought us closer, somehow." He nodded slowly, thoughtfully, and in that quiet darkness, I felt the profound depth of his understanding, his quiet acceptance. Mark had always been my partner, my confidant, my anchor in the storm. But now, in this unexpected moment of vulnerability, I realized he was also my ally, my fellow traveler in navigating the intricate, often bewildering complexities of life and love. The unexpected experiences of that single transformative night had illuminated parts of ourselves we hadn't known were still alive, still yearning, and in doing so, it had inadvertently rekindled a vital connection between us, a connection we hadn't fully realized we had begun to lose, to take for granted in the comfortable rhythm of our long-established life. "I don't regret it either," he admitted, his voice steady, firm, resonating with an unexpected strength. "If anything," he continued, "it's made me realize how much I still want to be with you, how much I want to keep discovering who we are together, who we are becoming." Tears welled up in my eyes, unexpected, but not unwelcome, and a surge of profound gratitude washed over me, a wave of deep appreciation for this remarkable man who had chosen, and continued to choose, to walk beside me through the unpredictable, often treacherous terrain of life. The singular, unsettling night had peeled back layers, revealing previously hidden aspects of ourselves, and in doing so, it had paradoxically rekindled a vital connection, a renewed intimacy we hadn't fully realized we'd allowed to fade, to dim, under the weight of routine. We didn't need to dissect every lingering detail of the night, to overanalyze every nuance. The quiet, unspoken understanding that flowed between us in the darkness was more than enough. It held all the answers we were both searching for, a quiet, profound affirmation that we were and remained willing to embrace the future together, whatever unexpected turns and uncharted territories it might hold. A week later, as we sat together in our small backyard garden, watching the sun slowly dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city landscape, Mark turned to me, his expression calm, but imbued with a newfound sense of focused resolve. "I think it's time we talked about what's next for us," he said, his tone gentle but undeniably firm. I met his gaze, feeling a complex mixture of apprehension and a strange sense of relief. I knew, deep down, that this conversation was inevitable, that we couldn't simply leave everything that had transpired in the realm of unspoken understanding, of comfortable ambiguity. We needed to explicitly address what that night had truly meant, to consciously find a path forward that would allow us to meaningfully integrate these unexpected, and sometimes unsettling, new insights into the fabric of our long-standing relationship. "What are you thinking?" I asked, my voice attempting to remain steady, despite the fluttering butterflies in my stomach. He took a deep breath, visibly gathering his thoughts, organizing the complex emotions that I knew were swirling within him, mirroring my own internal turmoil. "I think," he began slowly, deliberately, "I think we need to be truly honest with each other about what we each want, not just in our marriage, but in our lives, in this next chapter." He paused, searching for the right words. "We've spent so many years building this life together, brick by brick, but maybe," he continued, "maybe somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of some of the individual things we each truly value, the personal dreams we might have quietly set aside. He gestured vaguely, his gaze distant, introspective. That night, it showed me that there's more to explore, not just in terms of shared experiences, but in terms of who we are individually as people beyond Mark and Sarah. I nodded slowly, thoughtfully, understanding the profound truth embedded in his words. We had indeed fallen into a comfortable, well-worn rhythm, a predictable routine that, while undeniably steady and dependable, had also, perhaps inevitably, dulled some of the vibrancy, some of the essential spark in our relationship. That unexpected night had served as a jolt, a necessary wake-up call, a stark reminder that there was, indeed, more to life than simply going through the motions, than simply maintaining the status quo. "I feel the same way," I replied softly, reaching for his hand, my fingers interlacing with his. "It's made me realize," I confessed, "that there are parts of myself I haven't allowed to fully flourish, parts that I've kept hidden, or perhaps simply ignored, for too long. I continued, my voice gaining strength, conviction. I want to find a way to bring those parts of myself into our relationship, to truly show you who I am now, not just who I was when we first met, all those years ago." He squeezed my hand gently, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a deep understanding, a quiet empathy that resonated deeply within me. "Then," he said, a small hopeful smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "then let's promise each other that we will. Let's promise that we'll keep exploring, keep finding new ways to grow, together and as individuals. I don't ever want us to lose sight of the spark, that initial connection that brought us together in the first place." And in that quiet, intimate moment, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, I felt a renewed sense of commitment, a profound promise that went far beyond the traditional vows we had exchanged all those years ago in a crowded church in the city. This was a new kind of commitment, a commitment to ongoing growth, to continuous discovery, to actively keeping our relationship alive, vibrant, and ever-evolving, no matter where life's unpredictable journey might lead us. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me, a quiet knowing that we were both, finally, truly willing to do the necessary work, to actively invest in each other, not just as partners, but as complex, ever-changing individuals, each with our own unique dreams, desires, and aspirations. That unexpected, unsettling, revelatory night had been a moment of profound truth, a chance to finally lay bare the hidden, unspoken aspects of our hearts, and to consciously, deliberately, find a new way forward, a path that honored both our individual journeys and our deeply intertwined, shared path. In the weeks and months that followed, Mark and I made a conscious, concerted effort to nurture the renewed connection we had tentatively rediscovered, to actively cultivate the nascent growth that had begun to sprout in the fertile ground of our long-established relationship. We started planning small outings, intentionally creating pockets of time, moments carved out from the relentless demands of city life, that allowed us to step away from our familiar routines and experience the world and each other in fresh, unexpected ways. We went on hikes in the nearby state parks, exploring trails we hadn't visited in years, marveling at the quiet beauty of nature and the profound sense of peace it inexplicably brought. We took up dancing again, attending a weekly swing dance class in a dimly lit studio in the village, the energetic music and clumsy steps leaving us breathless with laughter, a joyous reminder of the spontaneity and shared delight that had once defined the early days of our relationship. We also intentionally began to carve out dedicated time for deeper, more meaningful conversations, setting aside an hour each week, a sacred ritual, to talk openly, honestly, about our innermost feelings, our long-term goals, and the quietly cherished dreams we still harbored, still longed to pursue. These dedicated conversations quickly became a cherished ritual, a safe, intimate space where we could be completely vulnerable with each other without fear of judgment or misinterpretation. In these shared moments of quiet intimacy, I felt a renewed sense of true partnership, a deep-seated belief that we were not just two people passively sharing a life, but two souls actively, consciously committed to helping each other grow, to flourish, to become the fullest versions of ourselves. There were moments of difficulty, of course, inevitable ripples of uncertainty that occasionally disturbed the newfound peace. Times when the vivid memory of that unexpected night resurfaced, bringing with it a complex mix of nostalgia, lingering questions, and the subtle, persistent ache of unspoken desires. But each time those complex, sometimes unsettling feelings arose, we consciously chose to face them together, openly, honestly, using them as a quiet reminder of the invaluable lessons we had learned and the challenging but ultimately rewarding path we were actively forging together. We had, almost imperceptibly, created a new foundation for our relationship, one that allowed us to embrace both the comforting stability of our long history and the invigorating spontaneity of new experiences, both the quiet solace of familiar routines and the thrilling adventure of uncharted territories. One warm summer evening, as we sat on our small porch, watching the lights of the city begin to twinkle like scattered diamonds against the darkening velvet of the sky, Mark turned to me, a gentle, knowing smile gracing his lips. "Sarah," he murmured, his voice soft with affection, "I feel like we're living our second chapter. I never thought it was possible to fall in love with the same person, twice." His simple words resonated deeply within my heart, touching a profound chord of truth, and I felt a sudden surge of overwhelming gratitude for the intricate, often unpredictable, but ultimately transformative journey we had undertaken together. We had weathered the unexpected storms of life, faced the complex, sometimes unsettling truths of love and desire, and emerged on the other side, stronger, more deeply connected, and more profoundly in love than ever before. That single, unexpected night at Lisa and Paul's apartment, the night that had begun so innocently and spiraled into such uncharted territory, had been a crucial turning point, a necessary catalyst for profound personal and relational growth. But it was the deliberate, conscious work we had undertaken in the aftermath, the unwavering commitment to open communication, to mutual understanding, to ongoing exploration, that had truly deepened our bond and ultimately transformed our lives. In that quiet, intimate moment, under the vast, starlit expanse of the New York night sky, I realized with a quiet certainty that love, true love, is not a single, static, unchanging feeling, a fixed point on a map. It is, instead, an ongoing choice, a conscious commitment to continuously rediscover and reinvent ourselves, individually and together, alongside the person we have chosen to share our lives with. And as I looked deeply into Mark's eyes, reflecting the soft glow of the city lights, I knew, with a profound sense of peace and unwavering certainty, that we would continue to actively choose each other, day after day, year after year, to build a life together that was richly textured, deeply fulfilling, and vibrantly alive. A life filled with both quiet understanding and exhilarating adventure, and a kind of love that only grows deeper, richer, and more resilient with each passing year. Months later, as I sat quietly in our living room, bathed in the soft afternoon light, reflecting on the long, intricate journey we had undertaken, I felt a deep, abiding sense of peace and unexpected fulfillment, a quiet contentment I hadn't even known was truly possible. That single, transformative night at the party, the night that had sparked such profound unease and unexpected revelation, had ultimately forced us to confront the sometimes uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our long-established relationship, and about the ever-evolving nature of love itself. But it was the conscious, deliberate path we had chosen to take in the aftermath, the unwavering commitment to personal and relational growth, the active embrace of vulnerability and open communication that had truly, profoundly transformed our lives. Mark and I continued to explore life together, hand in hand, finding joy in both the quiet, everyday moments and the exhilarating thrill of new shared experiences. We had, together, consciously created a marriage that genuinely honored both our individual identities and our deeply intertwined partnership, a resilient, ever-evolving relationship that was built on a solid foundation of unwavering trust, mutual respect, and a deeply shared, lifelong desire to keep actively discovering and rediscovering who we were, both separately and together. Looking back, with the clarity of time and distance, I finally understood that true love, lasting love, is not about achieving some elusive state of perfection or maintaining an impossible ideal of unchanging loyalty. It is, instead, fundamentally about being brave enough to consistently face the unknown, to willingly embrace the inherent complexities of life, and to actively, consciously find a way forward, together, through the inevitable storms and unexpected detours. We had learned, over time, to skillfully balance the comforting familiarity of cherished routines with the invigorating excitement of spontaneous exploration, consciously creating a love that was both profoundly strong and remarkably resilient, a love that could bend, but not break, under the inevitable pressures of life. And as we stood side by side, hand in hand, watching the sun slowly set over the sprawling cityscape on yet another beautiful New York day, I felt a profound, overwhelming sense of gratitude for the intricate, often challenging, but ultimately deeply rewarding journey we had undertaken. A journey that had led us finally to a place of true, authentic intimacy, a mature, ever deepening love that I knew, with unwavering certainty, would continue to carry us, hand in hand, through the rest of our lives, with hearts and minds always open to whatever unexpected joys and inevitable challenges the future might hold.